What's up, everybody? We are back. This is episode 4 for Meet the Masterminds. My name's Cloaken, and of course, I got a huge treat for you today. I'm very excited for this conversation. This is an incredible person, particularly for the team at Super Evil. Of course, I'm talking about none other than Tommy Krul. Tommy, thank you for being here with us. This is our founding CTO, and I'm really excited to learn more about your life, and happy that you took some time out of your incredibly busy day to just sit
Yeah,
down and
thank you.
chat a
I
bit.
mean, the pleasure is all mine. This is super fun.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. You know, you are someone that I sort of classify in this kind of Renaissance man category. I've only had a few months of getting to know you, but like the varied sort of pathways of interest that I've seen around
Yeah.
you and your talent and have fascinated me. Not only that, but the ways in which you do what you do have fascinated me, and I'm excited to learn more about that. But before we get into all that, how are you doing in this time? How's quarantine treating you? I know for me, I just got finished recording a video for Vainglory Community Edition, and I feel like I am the king of quarantine. I didn't even look at myself. My hair's long. I feel all this sort of
Oh, me too,
disheveled.
man. Like, I really need a haircut. Like,
Yeah,
my girlfriend is teasing me every single day. She's like, I can cut it for you. I can cut it for you.
I know,
Maybe
man.
one of these days I need to give in. But
It, it's such a weird time, and like even that thing of like getting a haircut. Like, when can I get a haircut? I'm assuming I could probably get one now, but it just like no one's there telling you exactly what you can and can't
I
do. I have
know.
no
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, yeah.
It's so
It's
surreal.
it's definitely it's interesting times.
Yeah, man. Well, let's talk a little bit about you. I'm excited to learn more. Like I said, Renaissance man, as far as I can tell. And, you know, one of the things that I'll tell you this, Tommy, I noted about you when I first joined, obviously, as CTO, it's like, oh, Tommy Kroll, this is the interesting person. But I show up to the office and then I see your desk, and the only thing I have to compare it to are the previous engineers that I've worked with in my game development career. And your desk is not like any other engineer I've ever seen in my life. Like, it kind of blew my mind. And to set the stage for the viewers, Tommy Kroll's desk at Super Evil Megacorp is a singular stand with a MacBook on top. Not a big MacBook, a small screened MacBook Pro, big desk, just the MacBook, just the screen. That is it. Now, Tommy, that is not a normal engineer, at least not a normal
It's
engineer as I relate to. I'm used to engineers with double screens, everything, you know, all over the place, you know, that there's
that's
something very interesting about that with you.
That's a
And
very interesting observation. I've never really thought about it like that. But yeah, I mean, the code is in my head. I don't really need to see it on like 5 different screens. In general, like I don't do very well with a lot of clutter
mm,
because like I think as an engineer, like for, at least the way I work, like there's already so a part of engineering is finding structure in the chaos, right? So
mm.
like I think in life you then want to minimize the chaos, and it just allows me to think a little bit better. I like my desk clean and simple.
Dude, I
Yeah.
loved it. I was like, man, that teaches me so much about Tommy, but I also want to know where it comes from. And, you know, I've often reflected on, like you've said this about your, whether it's your iPhone or your computer, like you purposely choose a lesser performant machine sometimes to ensure that the work that you're doing is capable of running on other devices and things like that. And I just think it's an interesting perspective. But anyways, I want to know how you found your way to computer science, and you know why this pathway. I know you have a bunch of varied interests. We've talked a lot about music and my
Mm.
time here, particularly, and I know that has a place in your past. But you know, we don't have to go all the way back. But talk to me about how you even got towards choosing this pathway for a career. And you know, we'll obviously dig into where it's taken you and brought you to this point. But why choose this path? Why computer science?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think you're right. Like my background and how I got to computer science is actually probably a little bit different than a lot of other engineers. Um, like I consider myself a builder. I was always a creator. Like I make things, and as a kid, and that really spans a whole bunch of different disciplines. So as a kid, the things that I was really into was like drawing and art and music, especially. So especially when I was younger, it was more like arts and crafts. I would build things, either whether that's Lego or just like paper. And then I really got into actually puppetry.
Hmm.
So as a kid, I would make tons of puppets, and I still have a deep love. Actually, if you look here, I have
Dude.
I
Tommy,
have a
you're getting like cooler
Kermit
by
the
the
Frog.
second. You're getting cooler by the second to me. This
I
is
have a
really
Kermit the
cool.
Frog replica that is really dear to me.
Hmm.
So yeah, I used to make things and build these worlds, and so early on it was like puppetry. I really got into drawing. I would draw comic books. It was actually my first little business when I was in elementary school. I draw comic books and I would sell them. I think for maybe the equivalent of like $1 or $2. I would like my dad would copy them at work, and I would sell them. And then when I got to my teenage years, actually, like it's sort of like it split a little bit. Like
Hmm.
part time, I was like super into music. So I had my own recording studio at home, and did a lot of musical theater. Initially as on the performing side, and then eventually as I got a little bit older, like 15, 16, I actually, because of some random events, I was asked to actually compose music for a theater production.
Wow.
And so like that made me switch sort of from just like this is a pure hobby in my in my bedroom to something that I had to do like somewhat professionally. So I wrote music for a couple of musical productions.
And you wait,
um
you were how old? This is 16, you said? 15, something like that?
yeah, I mean, I think
Wow.
probably the first one I wrote, I was 15, and I did it
Wow.
for maybe like 3 or 4 years, two per year.
Wow, man.
So actually quite a few. And this was
That's not
they were
normal,
sort of like
Tommy. That's not normal. Just saying.
they were
That's
sort of
cool.
like mid scale
Yeah.
productions. So maybe like each production was like a few thousand, like maybe like 5 or 6 performances of
Hmm.
600 people each. So like maybe a few thousand people for each play. So they
Yeah.
aren't like massively like professional like Broadway things, but like it's like in my hometown, it was fairly well known.
Yeah.
So that was like sort of like one part of my brain. And around the same time, I developed a love for computers. I actually started coding fairly early, way back on the sort of like home computer era. And I'm not sure that here in America you really had that. Maybe a little bit with the Apple II, but
Hmm.
so I'm originally from the Netherlands, Europe, and if you grew up in northern Europe in the 80s, there was like a sort of like a real strong homebrew computer culture. So this was like the Commodore 64, Atari ST, Amiga, like Sinclair, ZX Spectrum, all these like really old sort of like home computers. And you would essentially
Yeah.
like they're basically just a keyboard, and you plug it into like your CRT TV, and you switch them on, and it just boots into BASIC, right? Like you can't
Yeah.
do anything. There's no software for it. You have to type. Like if you want anything, you just have to make it. And so the funny thing is actually, so my parents, I had lovely parents. I'm
Yeah.
very blessed with them. And they were very generous to me in terms of like always making sure I had like, drawing equipment and like this music stuff. And they gave me all these opportunities. But there was one thing that my mom was like not a fan of. And you can guess what that was, of course. It was video
Hmm.
games. So she
Interesting.
was like,
Yeah.
you can, I had a television on my room, which way back in the day was like super fancy. Like none of that was a problem. But she was like, video games. I'm not sure that is so good for a kid. So actually, my neighbor gave me an old Sinclair ZX Spectrum, probably around the time I was about 7 years old, 7 or 8 years
Hmm.
old. And one day I just plugged it into my television. I was like, well, I want to play video games. What do I do? So I asked him, and he's like, I don't have video games for you. And my mom was not going to buy them for me. So really, the only solution was that I would start programming them.
Wow. Dude.
So really what happened is like over the years I would go and I would buy these video game magazines. I mean, this is like late 80s, early 90s, right?
Hmm.
So it's really pretty arcane. But I
Yeah.
would buy these magazines, I would see these games, and what I would try to do is just basically recreate them.
Hmm.
So like when I was like I think 10, I made like it was like a Warhammer 40K, like sort of like my own version of that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really loved the early LucasArts like point and
Yeah.
click adventures. So like
Totally.
I made a few of those. And when I say like I made a game, right, like these LucasArts games are really large. So like I would usually get to like 5 or 6 screens where you can point and click to like solve, and you would like escape the one room, and then my 11-year-old like self got distracted with another game I wanted to make. So Most of them I didn't finish,
Mm.
but that's sort of how I got my start with coding. So during my teenage years, it was really sort of these two tracks, like music
Mm.
on one side, and then sort of engineering on the other. And so when it came to college, uh, there were actually a bunch of things I considered.
Yeah.
One of them was studying architecture. So my grandfather is an architect. My father is a photographer. So
Mm.
there's sort of like artistic side, like runs in the family, like designing things, building things. And so I checked out some architecture schools. Didn't quite love it. Then the other thing I was really into at the time, and still am actually, was anything related to space technology.
Yeah.
But growing up in Europe, like the thing is, like if you grow up in America, there's actually so many things you have access to that a lot of people don't quite appreciate. But growing up in Europe, like there's nothing you can do. There's no NASA. There's no
Mm.
like Boeing.
Yeah.
There's some European companies, but I would have to first immigrate to another country in order to do something like that. Like there's
Mm.
Ariane Space or something in France. Like these would be like huge hurdles to climb, right?
Mm.
So I looked at a college for space technology, and although I was really into the topic, I did like like how they give you like 1 or 2 days of like sort of fake lessons, so not
Yeah.
fake
Yeah.
lessons, but like it was like an introductory course,
Totally. Sure.
and it was horrible. It was so boring.
Hmm.
And also like I basically like I went there like imagining like I wanted to build like the Starship Enterprise,
Yeah.
and I realized that like the best I would ever do is like I don't know build a hang glider or something like that. Like it was
Mm.
just not
Mm.
gonna be as as big as I imagined.
Interesting.
So
The world wasn't big enough for Tommy Kroll in those space programs.
not at the time, no. Maybe
Yeah.
now with space.
Maybe
If I
now.
would probably now if I'd grown up in the US, especially in this era of like
Yeah.
SpaceX, like there's lots of very interesting opportunities right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. I did
But
notice your schooling, you ended up doing AI, right? Was it AI and computer science? I
yeah,
saw
so I
something
actually
about
so
that on your.
it's also a funny story. So
Yeah.
yeah, I went to college, did this introductory day in Amsterdam, University of Amsterdam, and they and I couldn't quite choose. Like there were basically, I was either going to do AI or was going to do computer science. And their AI, because some people ask what the difference is, like their AI is actually fairly heavy on the psychology side. So it's a lot
Mm,
more like theoretical
I see.
than sort of applied.
Okay.
Um, and so my thought was, I'm going to do AI because it's just more interesting, right? It's sort of like where the future is going. And I did that, and I did that day, and it was kind of cool, but it didn't feel technical enough for me. Like I
Hmm.
felt like if I'm going to study this, like I don't only want to be able to know, like be able to talk about it and then have to tell someone else how to build it, but I want to know the fundamentals, right? Like
Yeah.
it's sort of like you need to know the theory, but you also need to have, you it's a little bit like AI. You can be an architect without knowing how to use a hammer, but like I want to
Oh,
understand
interesting.
like the material as well, right?
That makes sense, dude.
So
I
so
totally know
early
that
on,
impulse, by the way. I actually struggle with that internally. I realize I have a real issue with the things I can't wrap my mind around, like, and one of them is cars. I don't know how
yeah,
cars work. I mean, I know the chemical reactions, I get it, but like how a car works, like I actually feel insecure as a human because I don't understand it. I don't know it. I haven't spent time reading it, so
yeah,
therefore I just kind of like shut it out of my life, right? I just am like, I don't know. I don't know. Cars, yeah, no, no, I don't know.
yeah. You turn the
Uh,
key and they
yeah,
work.
yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
and when I reflect internally, I actually feel very insecure that I don't really know it. Like,
Ah,
you know what I mean? It's interesting about that. That's why sorry for the sidetrack, but I really,
oh, you're
really
good.
resonate with what you're saying here. When I first moved to Blizzard in Irvine, I was commuting with my bike, but I was like, I can know a bicycle. I can know a bicycle like that. And so I was like, I'm going to build my own bike. And I did. I built it spokes up, right? I was just like, I'm going to know my bike. I can do that, right? Like I have a brain and time enough to do that. So I'm going to build my bike ground up, right? And I felt that was very important. But anyways, I kind of sense that with when you're saying those things about AI, like you want to know the material.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so like going in, my expectation was really that I would fall in love with AI and that like computer science would be sort of my almost like an understudy, right? Like the
Mm.
thing I had to know, but like I didn't expect to be super into it. And it was what was interesting to learn is actually as I went through college, it's kind of like flipped around. Like so AI, like I finished it because I started it, but like I was actually more interested in the fundamentals of the technology than anything else.
Mm.
And and I still like, I mean, I'm interested in AI, but it never held my like deep passion, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
At the end of college, I sort of had made a little bit of a detour where my thesis project was actually in biotechnology,
Mm.
and and for a little bit, I thought I was going to do a PhD in that direction.
Mm.
Um, so graduated on both, and then was going to do this PhD, and then but wasn't really feeling it. And at the time, like I was still making sort of like video games, like on the side.
Hmm.
And but Holland, like growing up in Holland, like there is no video games industry to speak of. At least at
Right.
the time, there wasn't. And so, like I never even really contemplated going into video games. Like, it was just,
Mm.
like no one is going to hire you in a foreign country, out of school with no prior experience. I did some like demo scene coding.
Mm.
That was a thing in Europe, especially. But like it was all hobby. And then basically between graduation and when I was going to start my PhD, I I I gave myself like 2 or 3 months to work on some technology that I was passionate about, like because I was doing computer graphics at this time, right? So like
Mm.
my passion of recreating the video games as a kid sort of like turned
Yeah.
into like reading SIGGRAPH papers and sort of understanding like 3D technology, and like that was sort of like up and coming at the time. So we're talking like I started college like 90, 98, 97.
Mhm.
And so like early 2000s is basically when I graduated. And so I was reading these like computer graphics papers and was really interested in it. And like, it's like, what, like there's a couple of like these papers I just want to like, work on and explore. And for some reason, like I don't even remember what it was, but like probably like 2 months in or so, like at some point I came across this like little newspaper article, like
Mm.
really, really tiny, about a company in Amsterdam that just had landed a contract with Sony PlayStation. And I was like, holy shit, there's a company in Holland that is working with PlayStation. This is amazing, right? Like there was nothing like that in Holland.
Hmm.
And so I looked this up, and it was this company that no one had ever heard of. I had never heard of. They were called Guerrilla Games. And I was like, fuck it. Like I had just put together this like little like research project, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna print a resume. I'm gonna like make some
Mm.
screenshots of what I just made. And I just like blanketly emailed them. And it was really interesting because I would say like almost like the rest is history, right? But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I went there. It was a really small team at the time. It is actually like Guerrilla for those who don't know. So
Yeah, talk to me about
Guerrilla
early Guerrilla. I want to hear
yeah,
about this.
so
This is so
Guerrilla
interesting.
Games is a Dutch game developer, now really well known because of the Killzone franchise and because of Horizon Zero Dawn. Um, but its origin is actually, it's a merger of like three really small Dutch game studios, and they were all slowly merged into what was Lost Boys Games. So Lost Boys was like this .com boom like around 2000, like tech company, and they had this little sort of side team that was Lost Boys Games that was making games. And it was never really running a profit. They'd never done any interesting games. And over the years, so like small Dutch game studios, one that actually did receive a little bit of recognition. One studio did Jazz Jack Rabbit, if you
Yeah.
remember that
Yeah.
game, with Cliff Blazinski,
Yep.
and Ariane Broussais. So Ariane Broussais, at some point, his company was merged into that. And so that was Lost Boys Games. Lost Boys Games was at some point split off, became totally unknown game studio called Guerrilla Games. And after a couple of attempts, they managed to convince Sony of actually backing a project that they were doing, which at the time was which is what became Killzone 1 for PlayStation
Interesting.
2.
Yeah.
And it was around this time that I was able, like, I just walked into the door basically with my resume, and it was like, I've been programming for a long time. I've never worked on a game, but like I've made some myself. This is the stuff I've been doing. And this is a really great interview.
Interesting.
Like the funny thing with Guerrilla at the time was like there were very few people with experience. There
Mm,
were no people with a lot of experience, but there were very few people with experience. All of them were ex demo scene coders and like
mm.
super super talented people. And it was just this situation where like everyone was so eager to make something great,
Yeah.
and no one knew what they couldn't do,
I love
that
it.
it was just like the balls to the wall like
Yeah.
attitude of just we're gonna do this. And
That's,
I think that's how they convinced Sony at the time.
mm.
uh
By the way,
so
that is
going
so powerful, that concept. And it's interesting how I feel like, and I'm reflecting on my time at Blizzard when I talk about this, because when I think about early Blizzard, like especially the devs who are friends of mine who made like original World of Warcraft, like when I talk to the Shane DeBeers of the world, and I say like, "Hey Shane, why did you make WoW?" And then he's like, "Because people told us we couldn't do it. Like because
yeah
we, because
exactly, yeah,
like people said we couldn't, and we had no idea what we were like, what we didn't know." And I'm like, "Oh,
yeah,
that's such a beautiful thing, man." And it's like it almost feels like the more successful you get as a company, the harder it is to find that. And yet I
yeah.
think that's the success of innovative and creative companies, is
It's
those who
also like,
convince themselves.
yeah, totally. It's also like the more the if you have success, once you have success, you have more to lose, right? Like
Mm,
Guerrilla at the time,
100%.
it's also like, they hadn't done anything yet.
Mm,
And so like it was like basically nothing to lose and everything to gain. And it was a fantastic group of people. Like I'm so incredibly lucky to end up on that team. Like that was basically my early training in the industry,
yeah.
right? Super super talented group of people.
So
um yeah.
I'm curious, Tommy, like talk to me about the nature of, like I think about this stuff a lot. I think about it deeply, but talk to me about your perspective on the nature of games as a value, like as a value of life, as a value of time. Like, and I think about and I hear this very rich and diverse kind of story from you. There's so many pathways. I mean, you're talking about space exploration and music and like all of these things, right? Like, and yet games, right? There's such this cynical voice in my head all the time, even when I reflect on my own career, where I'm like, okay, games, right? Like, they're meaningful, they have purpose, but really, like, where do you stack rank that in the values of like importance of things? And I'm not asking you to like crack the code of that for me, but I am interested in getting your take on it. Like, where do you put
Yeah.
these things, and where does making games fall in this sort of
Yeah, I
hierarchy of
don't
meaning?
know. I don't think I've ever organized, or like, I don't think I've ever set a track in my life because I thought it was or wasn't meaningful. It was meaningful to me.
Sure.
Um, I think the most, like, the through line through the things that I did and the decisions I made was all about building things, like creating
Interesting.
things,
Yeah.
right? And it was, and if I sort of try to retrospectively like connect the dots, it's all about building worlds.
Mhm.
So whether it's puppetry and creating puppets to like create like an imaginary world, whether it's drawing comic books, whether even when it's writing music, the type of music I wrote was very like almost like story
Mm.
driven music, right? So
Yeah.
it wasn't necessarily pop songs. It was much more like either it was for musicals, or even if it was my personal music, it I would first write a scene like on paper of something happening, and I would write music to that scene. And I wouldn't even necessarily include lyrics, but
Mm.
I would let the music carry the story, and then I would throw out the story, and you're left with the
Mm.
footprint, right,
Yeah,
of
that's
that
so cool.
story.
Yeah.
So for me, like actually games is almost like the perfect intersection, right? Because it has that world building and fantastical element where you can create these amazing stories and these amazing interactive experiences. And at the same time, it's sort of like it 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 hooked into my brain in terms of like the problem solving.
Mm.
So even if I think about the type of art, for example, I like, I gravitate more towards industrial design than, let's say, like over the more like how do I explain this? So the artist painting for a museum,
Sure, like
right?
a
So
Renaissance
it's almost,
impressionist kind of thing or
yeah,
something.
exactly, right. So it's almost like it's applied art,
Got it.
and
Functional in some ways. Yeah.
yeah, it's that intersection between creating something that is beautiful or pleasant or
Mm.
interesting, as well as solving
Hmm.
a real world problem,
Yeah. There's some
right?
function to it. Yeah, that's like
Yeah, just
really, yeah.
making something that is beautiful is easy. Just making something that works is also easy.
Hmm.
Finding the intersection between the two, where it's not just functional, but you know, it's good to use, aesthetically pleasing, um, and
Yeah.
works well technically and functionally. I think that's a really interesting like intersection for me. And games for me live on that intersection, right? They're interactive experiences, really fantastical worlds, but they have a very, in order to create them, there's a lot of thought and functionality and technology and creativity that needs to go in.
Yeah.
Uh,
I don't think I've quite thought
yeah,
about it this way. Actually think that's a really, really interesting reflections. I'm gonna have to think about that stuff a good bit, but it totally makes sense what you're saying, and I love that. There's almost a the stuff that I gravitate to when you describe it that way is there's almost this element of service. Like there's this
mm,
element of service, which I think so much about that idea in my life. Like, how is this serving something? How is this serving my family? How am I serving, this end? And I think there is absolutely something very profound about games in that spirit of service. Like, actually,
yeah,
that's the thing that I love about games in terms of the developer player relationship. I love the live service component of like what this living relationship means between this product that is a game, but then also the ongoing evolution of it and how it serves the interests and sort of needs and kind of passion of the community
yeah.
that's surrounding around it. I think there is literally nothing else like it. I can't think of anything else that's quite like that. Maybe you could talk about comic books or serialized anime or something like this, but it's not as real time, it's not as living, it's
Yeah.
not as constantly on as sort of these digital experiences are. And I think that's a really interesting element of your reflection, that sort of functionality meets creativity and uh, sort of
Yeah, and I
service
think it's
piece.
also like, because it is this intersection of art and science,
Yeah.
basically, that I just really enjoy. Um, like I have similar passion for things like cinematography and like movie making and music, as I said before. But like I think it would only tickle one part of my brain.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm also, I mean, let's also be honest about it. I don't think I have enough talent in those areas to really make a change, to like a dent in the world. So maybe there's also a part of just practical, practical reality that this is.
Well, we're our harshest critics. I haven't heard your music, so I'm going to reserve my judgment until I get an opportunity to do that. But I hear what you're saying. Now, we don't have to go through like all of your kind of early stage career stuff, but I would like to figure out how you get from ambitious new game developer with an ambitious team at Guerrilla sort of onward to, you know what, let's start my own company, let's build my own engine, let's all of these things. Like, I know you've spent time at some incredible places, not just Guerrilla, Factor 5, you spent some time working with Riot on League of Legends and sort of their early years.
Yeah.
But talk to me about how this chapter in your career sort of shaped you, shaped your mind, and eventually helped sort of lead you to this decision of, "Ah, I want to try to do something that's mine and build, not just do something that's mine, but also build my own foundation upon which that work will happen." Like,
Yeah.
yeah, talk to me about that chapter in your
Yes,
life.
sure. so I guess an important step is, as I said, like I was working in Amsterdam, right? I live
Yeah.
in San Francisco now. So a big change in my life was actually moving to the United States.
Mm.
So after a couple of years at Guerrilla, like I love that team and I still love them. I came to a very difficult moment where on the one hand, I really wanted to stay with the team and the people, and I love the products that they worked on, and I knew they would continue to do amazing. And I think history has shown that they have continued to do
Yes, for sure.
far and beyond what like we could even imagine at the time. Um, but I also knew that for my own personal career in life, I needed something else. I needed to make a next step
Mm.
because I came into that studio as straight out of college, right?
Right.
And there wasn't a whole lot of career opportunity within Holland. So at the time, there's actually funny stories how I ended up
Yeah.
in America. At the time, I was just looking for a way to maybe live and work in America, and I really didn't know what that meant. Like, I didn't like I didn't know where San Francisco was. Like like if you
Yeah.
don't grow up here, like there's a lot of I didn't really know what the Bay Area was. But I knew, for example, Apple, right?
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing is after a couple of years of experience, I wrote a letter to Apple and I said like, hey, like I saw that they on their website, very,
Yeah.
very naive, right?
Yeah.
I saw that they had like a position open on their website for like I think a driver engineer or something like that.
Mm.
I'm like, like I want to move to America. This is Apple. It's going to be great. I'm actually very happy that maybe that didn't happen. But anyway, so like I emailed them, never heard back. And like, maybe 3 months later, I'm like, for whatever reason, I'm like, you know what? And I click on my spam folder and I
Yeah.
type the word Apple. And I
Ooh.
had gotten a reply from them within a
Mm.
week of me sending that email. And it had gone straight to my
Interesting.
spam folder. I'm like, well, damn it. So like I write back, I'm like, hey, is this position still open? Like, I'm so sorry, I like totally missed it. And they were like, yeah, it's still open. So I actually went through multiple rounds of interviews,
Interesting.
and I think 2 rounds or something. Like one was like a short questionnaire, then a long questionnaire, and then a phone call. And then they were like, okay, well, we're ready to actually bring you on board. Which airport are you flying from? And I'm like, Amsterdam. And they're like, Amsterdam? I'm like,
Oh.
yeah. They're like, oh no, this position is actually not hiring any foreign candidates.
Oh
I'm like,
my goodness.
what?
You
Like
like
I
went
had
through all those
started planning my life. Like I went through like 3 rounds of interviews. I could basically I'd like start looking at pictures. I started researching what San Francisco was. I was half there.
That's so
And then
crazy.
like I at this point, like I couldn't go back anymore.
Mm.
Even though like I probably wouldn't have taken any other job other than Apple because that was the big name, and like
Yeah.
I like the company and I like the
Yeah.
history, so like that was sort of like an enigma, right? I was gonna work
Yeah.
for Apple, and at that point I was like, like maybe I just I can't say no, and and then very randomly again, like maybe like a few days later, I came across this job posting from another uh, um, studio, and they happened to be in the Bay Area as well.
Mm.
And sent my resume. They literally like flew me over a week later, and it was interesting because like I think they flew me in on a Thursday, so I took 2 days off from work, flew me in on a
Yeah.
Thursday, interviewed on a Friday. So this is from Holland for those who don't know. This is like a
Yeah.
10-hour flight, right?
Yeah.
So they fly me in on like Thursday. I arrive like late at night, midnight or something. Next morning, I have a whole day of interviews at this company, like starting at like 10:30 in the morning all the way to like 4 or something like that.
Yeah.
On Saturday, I drove around San Francisco to just decide whether or not this was the life I want. On Sunday, I fly back, and on Monday, I have to pretend at work like nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
And I got a job offer from them on Tuesday.
Wow.
And then then everything goes into like
Yeah.
a higher gear, right? Because now I'm like, I was renting an apartment in Holland. I had to, I had a girlfriend at the time.
Sure.
We had to move here, and like I had to quit my job, and and tell my parents that I was going to move to the other side of the world, right? So
What
yeah,
year
that
is
was
this? Can you frame my mind around time? Like, what's the time frame here?
2006.
2006. Gotcha.
Mid 2006, I think.
Interesting. And I'm so
Yeah.
curious what that transition was like. I mean, let
Yeah, and
alone
it
like
was
working
actually
in another
so this.
country.
Yeah, so this was on the cusp of the PlayStation 3 being
Mm,
launched, right?
got it.
So the good thing was like at the time, because of working with Guerrilla, I had like quite a bit of experience working with PlayStation 3, and there
Mm,
weren't a lot of those people around. So like that was one of the reasons that like they were pretty eager to get me on board at the studio here.
got it.
Uh, so that's actually how I ended up in San Francisco. And but the truth is, especially if I look back, like I think deep down inside I always wanted to work and live abroad. Like that
Mm,
you know I love Holland, but like the country was always going to be too small
got
for
it.
me to truly be happy
Yeah.
for some strange reason.
Yeah.
And even when I moved, like I moved here and like worked at the company, worked there for a couple of years, but I always knew I was gonna start my own company.
Mm,
And I think in a way also like moving to the US was because I wanted to start my own company. Like even when I was back in Holland, like I had a lot of ideas of, I tried to work with a couple of people to start a project and get something off the ground, but the sort of entrepreneurial spirit really isn't there in Holland. At least at the time, it wasn't. Like, I wouldn't be able to honestly say whether or not it has changed a lot in the last couple of years. But at the time, it really wasn't there. And Guerrilla, for as amazing as the place it was, that's the anomaly. Like they
right.
were the one company in that country that did this type of thing and that had this sort of almost like Hollywood like big thinking of like, we can do this and we're gonna make these great IPs, and just really nothing else.
Yeah.
So moved here and worked here for a while at this company. Also, when you move as an immigrant to another country, you have to, because of your visa, you have to work at another
Yeah.
company, right? Like
You have to have a
my
sort of sponsor,
status,
right?
yeah, like my status as an immigrant was wholly like tied to the company I worked for,
Hmm.
and yeah, so it wasn't until quite a few years later that I was able to essentially quit my job and even try something for myself, because, as an immigrant, not having a job means being deported. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. How did you make that transition? Was that just getting into the green card process and all of that allowed you to do that? Or, I mean, all of that stuff is so foreign to me, like obviously as a kind of a native American citizen,
uh,
but
it's a complicated story.
yeah, I mean,
So yeah, so Factor 5 actually went out of business,
mm,
unfortunately. On, if you remember, the big economic crunch around 2008, 2009.
yeah,
And a bunch of the publishers that they were working with, those publishers went actually out of business. And because of the way console gaming industry works, a lot of the funding that you have as a studio, like most game studios, they don't have enough cash reserves to just build the games they want to build.
right.
They basically create, in a small team, they create a pitch, they sell that pitch to a publisher, and the publisher, if they greenlight it, they basically give you sort of milestone by milestone enough money to keep developing the game.
Mm,
But the moment your publisher stops paying you, like your clock is running out.
yeah,
And like console games take a ton of people, right? So like, that's like 100 people, 150 people on staff in Silicon Valley. That's a huge burn.
yeah. It's like in 2 months
So
you're gone, kind of thing. It's like maybe
totally, and
less.
that is
Yeah.
exactly what happened to Factor 5,
Mm,
right? Like their publisher like went out of business. They, at the time, like no one was investing. Even the major platform holders weren't really like taking on new projects. And within 3 months, like the studio, like I think they were around for like 18 years or something, right? Like
yeah.
they go way back to like Commodore 64 days.
Hmm.
And they were out of business within months, a couple
Wow.
months. Yeah.
It's such a brutal
So,
industry in that way. It's just
oh, totally.
so
Yeah,
crazy.
very, very sad.
Yeah.
It must have been really, really, really rough on the founders.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, like as a green card holder, like you're also kind of in a shitty position because, or I actually didn't have a green card yet. I had a visa.
okay. Yeah.
I was in the process of getting a green card. But if your sponsoring company goes out of business while you were in the process for your green card, you lose all progress.
Yeah, you have
So
to like
basically, I was
reset,
like
right? Yeah.
completely right. So I was set back by like a year and a half or 2 years or something like
Mm,
that. Managed
crazy.
to find another job, and at that studio, I actually received my green card, and and once I had my green card, I knew I wanted to start my own company. So
Mm,
I had some savings, and at that point, I was able to quit my job and just was gonna do my own thing
yeah.
for. I basically set myself a budget that I would, like be okay with 1 year of like burn rate, basically, like living here and paying for my expenses, but not having any solid income. And that was essentially day one of Super Evil.
That's so interesting. So yeah, that's so brave, so interesting. I'm inspired by all these kinds of stories. Startup stories, especially in games, kind of blow my mind because, like to the point that you're saying, it's a brutal industry, takes so much courage. First off, making games is insanely difficult, super hard, um, and I think just congratulations on your courage. I guess it's so much admiration for those moments. So how did this season of your life begin? Was it, let me just work on my own tech, let me begin sort of laying the foundations of what would be an engine? Was it trying to find the right colleagues? Like, take me through the initial kind of birth processes or sort of birth pains of how Super Evil came to be, as well as the engine upon which you're now building Super Evil games.
Yeah. So I was always building games technology, and even when I was, um, like when I was working at other studios, um, I always made sure that just in my spare time I had like some hobby project. And a lot of these hobby projects started like I never set out to write a full game engine because for those who know game engines, like it's a massive amount of work and a massive amount of code. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of lines, millions of lines of code,
Yeah,
and it's complex software.
yeah,
And but what happened is that like I would write these systems for the companies I worked at, and like after they were done, I would go home and be like, oh man, like I could have done this differently. And now
mm,
that I understand how the whole thing fits together, I have a better idea, right?
mm,
Whereas at work, you have to move to like the next project because there's no point in trying to perfect every single system you write. It
yeah,
has to be good enough for what it needs to do, and then you write the next system. But when I got home, I would get like, okay, like I wrote this for Killzone, or I wrote this for this other game, and like like this kind of work, but like this system was like totally didn't work out. Like I could totally redo this and do this in a different
mm,
way. And
yeah,
it's basically started as a way to sort of both teach myself
mm,
better engineering as well as improve on the ideas that I had
yeah,
done,
sure.
and just like explore ideas that otherwise I wouldn't have the time for. And it's just started with individual projects, whether that is like serialization, like
Mm,
saving and loading and saving files, or audio, or data driven shader
yeah,
generation process, or code generation, or like all these types of like very sort of like insulated, very technical little you know boxes of functionality. And that went on for many, many years.
mm.
And at some point, I just had so many of these like individual pieces of an engine
You
lying
just
around.
like grabbed him.
Yeah, that I was like, so that was basically the moment I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna quit my job and I'm gonna do this for a year.
Mm,
And basically that year just worked on basically putting all these pieces together.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
Man, that's amazing. I want to hear more about the Super Evil story and how this all looks, and we'll get into this because there's so many interesting stories for that. But I do want to talk about this, engine maker piece, and it's such an otherly part of game dev. Like I come from such like the pure kind of creative, sort of heartbeat side of what games are and what they mean to people and all of that. but this is so other for me, especially in terms of my skill set and all of that. And I look at it with such profound admiration in some ways, because when we talk about the effort of making games as a creative endeavor, it isn't just coming up with the stories and how the gameplay works and all the numbers. That's actually this, there's something more sort of prime, which is no, you can't just build the set and the props and the story. You have to build the tools to build the set, the props, and the story. It's like, it's so brutal. It's such a brutal an idea. Like, it's like, who is that crazy? Who is that? It's already hard to have the creative moment, which
Yeah.
with X number of people, like the more people you add, the more complicated it gets. But that's how games are made. That they're not just made by one person, unless you're the rare bird, right? Especially big games, typically they're not made by one person, though there are exceptions. But then to say, no, I'm going to tackle that side. That just takes like that's huge. I have immense respect for it, and it feels so other, like I said. And I also think it's a very stressful part of the piece, because all of the effort around the creative side hinges on this. Like, if this isn't stable, if this isn't functioning, if this isn't informative, or uh, allows this part to do its job, it all falls apart. And so it feels like your role as sort of engine architect, or CTO, whatever you want to call it, just the head of all of this technical aspect of our work, it's such the focal point of pressure. And I'm curious what that's like for you. Maybe it doesn't manifest in your day-to-day the way that I would anticipate it would. Like, it causes me great anxiety to think about it. Or maybe there's such a deep trust in the stability of your tooling, or the extent of your knowledge around that, considering you built it. But how do you deal with that? Like, how do you cope with that pressure, or what I would anticipate being that pressure, as someone who's accountable for the framework of the creativity that sits on top of it? Like, is it a deal for you? Like, am I making this story up in my head?
No,
Like,
I mean, I don't know that I experience it like that.
mm,
I do understand where you're coming from, and I mean, there's definitely some pressure that comes with it,
yeah,
but it's also what I love doing,
got it.
and to some extent, it's what I've been doing for a long time. So,
Yeah.
I do like to think that I sort of like know my stuff.
Hmm.
I'm also comfortable with the areas of expertise I don't know, and we have some amazing people currently at the studio, and also that I've worked with over the years, that have made amazing contributions to our technology and to various parts of the stack. Um, you know, and that I deeply trust, right? So yeah, I don't think I really see it
It's like a
as
pressure point or
particularly
anything.
stressful.
Yeah.
No. I mean, like when you ship a game, there's the stress of making sure that it works and that it's stable, and but like um it sort of comes with the territory. There is
Yeah.
always, but I think that all creative people have this, and ironically, like I consider myself, like I would almost more naturally group myself under creative people than
Mm,
under technical people.
yeah.
And I mean, I don't think that is necessarily true, uh when you look at what I do, but it's sort of how I feel my brain is wired.
Mm,
And I recognize a lot of the struggle that creative people have,
hmm.
or even like the same sort of struggle that I have when I do more traditional creative things like music or art, where like I get total writer's block. I get total like
Hmm.
performance anxiety, where I'm like, I've been faking this all along, and someone is going to discover that I really have no clue what I'm talking about. And I think like whenever I've said this to people that are artists or musicians, they immediately recognize that feeling of, right, like of the fear of not being nearly as good as that, like
Hmm.
your art requires you to be. And you
Yeah.
see all these other people that are better at art, or that are smarter engineers than you. And I get that too. So in that way, it is sometimes stressful, where like I have no idea how to solve this, right?
Yeah.
Like you look at a game and it runs 15 frames a second, and you know that 2 months from now it needs to be 60 FPS without any problems, and you have no clue where to even start. But
Mm,
on some level, I also now trust that if I just like take a deep breath and start at the beginning and work my
hmm.
way through it, I've done this before, and I know that there's light on the other side of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And then when you come out on the other side, there's this enormous eureka feeling of like, I'm the smartest person in the world. And you do it for that, 2-hour adrenaline rush that, like,
Totally.
uh, that endorphin that, like,
You know what this reminds me of? The way you're talking. I don't know if you ever watched it, but the documentary with Alex Honnold, Free Solo, where he climbs
oh,
El Cap. He climbs El Cap
not that I
free
would
solo.
ever climb
Yeah,
anything like that,
no,
but
but it's an
yeah,
interesting flow state that you're talking about, because typically if you think, hey, I'm gonna go climb El Capitan without a rope, like to someone like
yeah,
me, who, I mean, I've done a good bit of rock climbing, but I would never consider doing that. That's unbelievably terrifying. In fact, if you watch the documentary, it's the most horrific film of all time.
oh, it
Actually,
is butt clenching. It is butt clenching.
exactly.
It
But
was so stressful. Like my hands, like I saw it in, I think I saw it in IMAX.
yeah,
Like my hands were dripping sweat.
dude, I'm like, this is a horror film. That's the way I felt. This is the scariest movie of all time.
Yeah,
Um,
but fantastic documentary for anyone
yeah,
who hasn't seen it.
and
Go
then
watch it. It's
when you get in the mind of Alex, he's just like, when people are like, "Aren't you afraid?" and he's just like, he's almost just like a robot. He's like, "No, I can't. Like, if I were afraid, I wouldn't do it." Like,
yeah,
it's like this interesting thing. So, anyways, I reflect on how you're talking about solving these problems and being in that state, because to me it feels so other. Like I said, I'm like, oh well, that sounds scary. It sounds like a lot of pressure. The whole entire game kind of runs on this, and it all needs to be stable in order for the magic and the ethereal creativity and the interactiveness, all
yeah,
those profound things that we were talking about earlier, to take place on top of. And like, to me, that seems massive, right? But to you, it's like, no, 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 I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't feel, the confidence of your experience and your practice. And it reminds me
yeah,
of how Alex would talk about that. It's like, he doesn't feel the fear anymore. Like, when they
yeah,
do those MRIs or whatever, they study his like brain, and it's like, oh, you're like dead, dude. You have like a dead brain. You don't feel fear the way other people would. But
but
anyways,
then
that,
actually,
yeah,
if now that I think about it, what I actually do find very hard in my job, and because, like, there's one thing about writing an engine, or doing engineering, and doing it sort of by yourself as an engineer, but I do have a very hard time. Like, I have no problem speaking in public,
yeah,
but I have a hard time, for example, getting in front of the engineers and doing this sort of rah-rah speech of like, we can
mm,
do it. Mostly because I am very comfortable speaking about things that I know how to do, but
mm,
there is a part of what they call like expert knowledge, where you can't quite explain
mm.
why you do what you do or how you do it. And if I need to stand in front of a group and say like, yes, we can do this, it almost feels, I have a hard time making it feel authentic,
I see.
because I know I can get through it, but I can't quite explain how I'm going to do it, let
Mm,
alone explain how you're going to do it.
yeah.
And
And you don't want to
I
fake the
don't know
confidence.
exactly. And like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, I know from practical experience we'll get through it, but I don't necessarily yet feel that I will be able to do it. Like, there's a weird
Yeah.
sort of cognitive dissonance between it.
That's interesting, man. It
And therefore, like,
yeah.
my approach is just like, okay, we're just like, let me just do it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, if you have questions, come to me. I can help you, especially in a one-to-one situation.
Yeah.
I can make the task, I can give it to people. I can't do the sort of inspirational rah-rah that,
Yeah.
like a lot of other people are very, very good at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's
which
interesting,
actually
man.
came somewhat as a surprise when I realized this. Like, when you transition from being a startup founder where you're like
Yeah.
one or two people, it should be said, like, I didn't start Super Evil by
Right.
myself. I actually
Yeah.
originally started with Stefan Sherman,
Hmm.
um, who is a fantastic engineer by himself and also a great game designer.
Hmm.
Um, so after I actually quit my job, he joined me maybe a month or two later. He actually moved into my house,
Mm.
and that first year, basically, where like where we worked on Super Evil, it was parts, or like tying up the loose ends of the engine, which at that point was actually fairly complete already. Um, and also we try to do some projects with various other studios, and like he had a bunch of game ideas that he was slowly sort of developing at the time.
Yeah.
um but yeah, so like so for example, he was much better at the sort of like inspirational, like getting in front of a group,
Yeah.
and have that confidence, and although like I know how to do it and I know I can get there, um
I
yeah.
hear what you're saying.
Does
I
it
have
doesn't
this
make any sense?
totally,
Like
dude. I
I
actually, I'm laughing because I relate to it almost in my marriage in some ways. Like my
you
wife,
don't know how you're gonna do it, but you'll get
yeah,
through.
my no, not exactly like that, but maybe. Like my wife will have there's some emotional crisis or something, right? Like, and it's truly a conundrum, right? There's no clear answer. Like, there's just like,
Yeah,
there's no way to say it, right? But she'll just throw the question at me, like, I don't know what it is, but the question comes, right? And like, I don't have an answer, right? And so I don't answer. Like, I'll just be there, and I'm okay with like silence, because I'm not going to fake that I know the answer. I'm not going to pretend that I have the confidence against the answer. I'm just going to like think about it, right? And then she'll
yeah,
get so upset that I'm not saying anything. And I'm
yeah.
just like, I feel like words are a
I
lie.
can't.
Like, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
have a
yeah,
word for you. I don't have, and this is that part where it's like, I wish I knew how to do that as well sometimes in a way that was just like, not because I need it, but because she needs it, or you know what I mean?
yeah,
There's some element of service here that is beyond like what I feel good at, but I need to figure out how
yeah,
to provide, because yeah, it is interesting in these collaborative moments, whether that's a marriage or making games, like that person side of it is another layer of complexity that makes the task of the work all the more challenging in some ways, but also
yeah,
valuable. Like, when you do have those breakthrough moments, or you do, you know, win those wars in the trench, or find the confidence to push through the unknown and do that together, like it sort of cements your bond, and sort of,
yeah,
yeah, it makes your company feel like a company, right? Like
yeah.
that's an interesting term, because it's almost like a military term, this idea of a company, like we're in the war together, right? So but so you start yours, you and Stefan, in your apartment. How does this evolve from here? I want to get to the Apple stage. I want to get to Vainglory announce, and I want to hear about what
How
that's
much more
like.
time do you
I
have?
know, I know. We're this is probably a longer one than normal, but I'm really enjoying this
Yeah,
conversation, and we can cut it off whenever. But I do want to try to hear a little bit about some of these
yeah, of
moments.
course.
I think the Vainglory announce in particular is an interesting one, because it's so tied to it was so tied to Apple in a lot of ways, and like, I know, given your respect even for the company, like you talk about, there's almost like a history there for you. That to me seems not only fascinating from a game standpoint, like Vainglory was a hardcore game that showcased on an Apple product, which isn't necessarily a platform typically known for games either, but yet something in this moment with iPhone 6, I believe, right? This was a big moment. They had a
Yeah,
lot to show. You were clearly prepared, and I don't know. I'm curious about that whole moment, what it was like. How did it even come about? Like, and then what was the actual execution of the event like? What is it like being on the Apple stage? All of those moments, and I don't know.
yeah.
There's
I mean,
so
oh,
much
well,
there.
you're talking about a long period of time,
Yeah,
still, right?
yeah,
So even before I started working with Stefan, like the iPhone had come out, because I could think that was, what was it, like 2008 or something
yep,
like that, 2007, 2008. So, at the time I already started porting my phone, my engine to the iPhone. Like I previously had ran on PlayStation and some other platforms, and of course it ran on Mac and it ran on Windows. But yeah, I started porting it to iOS, and at that point, because also like mobile games were becoming uh, we're becoming a platform to do something on. There's actually an interesting story there. So there's actually sorry for the detour, but
no, dude. By the
so
way, I don't. You probably even know the smarter questions for me to ask. I'm interested in all of these things, and I know we could probably stay here for forever. So, feel free to
no, but
offer what you think are the
yeah,
best.
yeah. So the name Super Evil Megacorp.
Yes, let's do that.
So it actually came from the following anecdote. I wanted to start a games company, and I've been talking to a lot of my friends about starting a games company, and and I didn't really know of a name. And but at the same time, you know, I came from like PC and console games, and so you know, like that to me was real games, like core games, like real games that I loved and grew up on, and you know, those were the types of games I wanted to make. And so when I started telling people like, oh, you know, I'm porting my engine to mobile, and like, you know, want to start a company and maybe we'll do mobile games, you know, you have to think back. This would have been around, I don't know, like 2000, yeah, 2008, something like
Yeah.
2007. There were no mobile games to speak of, right? Like, you know,
Right.
like the industry was dominated by like match three games, like Candy
Yeah.
Crush, and like, you know, that was what it was like.
It was still
That was what,
evolving from like Facebook games to mobile games. Like there was like
yeah.
that kind of,
And really the majority of these games, I mean, like they were like, I shouldn't talk down on them because they're impressive in their own right as business models and as companies that they were built on. But as a gamer, all these games felt like crap. Like they
totally.
were very shallow, thin wrappers, essentially around slot machines.
We may still
And
be in that category, though it's changing.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot better now. But
Yes.
there is still a lot of that. But like,
Yeah.
I really dislike that, like on a fundamental level.
Totally.
You know, like if you know, like for anyone who's listened to the interview this far, you know, like I came from the whole world building and like
Yeah.
creative and like make these amazing experiences. You know, like I didn't want to build Candy Crush. Like that
Yeah.
was not the type of game I wanted to make. And and so when I told one of my friends, like, hey, you know, I'm gonna probably try to make a mobile game. And he was like, dude, like, weren't you always like big ideas, like real games? Like, why do you want to create like a mobile game, like a
Yeah.
mobile game? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
these
Totally.
basically
It's
these
a dirty
evil
word.
games, like a
Yeah.
dirty word, like,
Yeah.
you know, like all these evil companies that just, you know, make these crappy games and like charge a ton of money for it and get people addicted, right? And then he cracks his joke and he goes like, well, you know, if you're gonna be that company, at least like put it on the front door, call
At
yourself
least
Super Evil
own it.
Megacorp. They will, at least they will know what they got themselves into. Like
Yeah.
no one can blame you afterwards. And like I thought it was hilariously funny.
It
And
is.
and you know, funny thing is like I didn't even at the time think about keeping that name.
Mm.
But uh as we were looking for a company name, every time we told this anecdote to someone, everyone remembered it and everyone
Yeah.
laughed.
Yeah.
So it sort of just became the name. And like at one day we just all, you know, realized like this is the name that everyone likes and remembers.
Mm.
So why not actually stick to it?
I love that. I
Anyway,
love
so
that.
so
I love the name,
that's
by
where
the way. I think
thank you.
it's like it's a constant litmus test. I don't know if I said this before. I think about it a lot, though. It's that idea that like that this name is only really cool if it isn't true. Like the second the name is
Yeah.
true, it like loses all of its creative potency. So I love it because it's like this constant reminder of what we never want to be. And it's like staring in the mirror like 24/7 just to be like constantly checking yourself, right? Like because
Yeah.
the second you lose the ability to say that is really not what we are, like
Yeah.
the name loses its power, right? And so
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
kind of an interesting like almost like stick in, or like I think of Gandalf, where it's like we're not gonna go there. So we're so committed to not going there that we're just gonna go ahead and call ourselves it, right? Like it was
Yeah.
just like, you know, because it's like I, I don't know. I
That is
love it. I
exactly
think
where
it's a
it came
really
from.
cool name. Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. So wait, where was I going with that
Oh,
story?
I don't know. I
Oh,
was like, tell me
yeah.
about Apple. Tell me
no,
about
but
everything. Yeah,
so early days. So
yeah.
so basically for what probably was about 1 year, it was just Stefan and me, like in
Mm,
our kitchen, living off our savings, eating instant noodles and ramen,
yeah.
and trying to live cheap in an incredibly expensive city like San Francisco. And after a year, we kind of came to the conclusion we'd written a ton of technology, we improved some of our tools, um, we had developed some game ideas, we had tried to work with a few companies, uh, but nothing really came together.
Mm,
Uh, and you know, like we had set on ourselves a budget for like how much money we would spend, and we kind of like got to the limit of that, and we ended up actually, I wouldn't say pressing pause, but like we ended up finding a contract with Riot Games,
Right. Yeah.
and we both basically contracted ourselves as Super Evil Megacorp to Riot Games for about a year and a half. We both worked on separate teams, and did a bunch of work on League, various game modes. It's a long time ago now. I don't
Sure.
quite remember exactly the different projects that both me and Stefan worked on. But we had a great experience there, and really, I think the interesting experience with Riot, and which is why I'm so happy that I had I was so blessed to have worked at the various game studios that I ended up at. Both Guerrilla Games and Factor 5 were incredibly technically savvy studios, extremely savvy. And, I've worked with and at other studios since, but like those two studios, if you would go into an engineering meeting, compared to any other place I've been, like the discussion is just on a different level. And, but that wasn't necessarily the case for all disciplines, right? So at the time, I think now, especially Guerrilla is much, 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 much better at their game design. But Killzone 1 will never be remembered for amazing game design.
Yeah.
It had interesting tech, and it was a great like first out of the door project, but it wasn't a shining example of amazing game design. Where something, for example, like Halo, which also came out around the same time, was right.
Yeah.
When we were at Riot, it was the exact opposite. At the time, Riot's technology wasn't great, but their ability to think through game design was just on a level that I had never heard. I had sat through plenty of design meetings at other studios, but Riot, it was every discussion you had with someone was a masterclass in game design. In the same way that the same was true for technology at Guerrilla Games.
Yeah.
And between me and Stefan was really sort of like the design guru with a great engineering background, and I was the engine tech guru, and just maybe helped him develop some of ideas, but I was never a great game designer. But we're being at Riot really shaped our understanding of how to design games, and I think especially for Stefan at the time, that was very formative experience. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And after being at Riot for a while, we basically were at this junction where Riot really wanted to hire us as internal engineers. They even offered to sort of like buy us out and maybe take over some of the technology. But we really wanted to go back to basically working on our own studio, and it was a difficult decision because Riot was extremely great to us. We had a fantastic time there. We were compensated very well by them. So we went from having no income for a year to having a great income for a year and a half, and then again having to say okay, we're just gonna do this by ourselves.
Yeah, man.
But we looked at each other and we decided this is what we want to do. So we ended our relationship with Riot and sort of went back to the drawing board. At the time, another founder joined us, and that was really he had much more of a business background, and his name is Bo, and that was when sort of the tripod was formed, where we have the technology. When I say we have the technology, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was the best it could possibly be, but we had in doing tech, we had a beginning of doing game design, and we had knowledge to create a business plan.
Right.
And that was when we were first able to raise money. Of course, our experience with working on League was super influential in deciding to build Vainglory. which actually started out much simpler. It actually evolved into a more complete MOBA than how we started out, because you have to think, you know, there were no core games on mobile when we were
Right.
making Vainglory. It just didn't exist.
Yeah, just the idea
So
of having a synchronous game, like a one where you're playing against other people, like
exactly,
that
like it
that
was
alone
not done.
is,
And
yeah.
like I knew I could write the technology, but like we didn't really know whether as a product it would work, right? So
Mm,
that's why we originally designed it as a 3 versus 3,
yeah.
fewer abilities. The original was uh I think the original inspiration actually came from I think it was called ARAM at the time,
Absolutely, yeah.
which at the time was not an official game mode.
Right.
It was just like some
Like a modded version. Yeah.
yeah, modded version.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how we started. That's how we initially started with the single lane. Vainglory actually evolved a bunch of different maps. We actually in our design iteration for that first map, we actually went to the 3-lane version.
Mm,
Um, Noticed that especially with 3 people, it was way too big. We had to pare it down and create sort of these more choke points where people
sure.
are forced to encounter each other with smaller teams. Um, and and a lot of it we kind of like we made it up as we went along. We started fairly casual, and
Mm,
then it was just you know one mechanic at a time where we like, okay, well, we need to have last hitting,
yeah.
because like and and it just came out of like tons and tons of playtesting where
Mm,
we started noticing that the game was actually quite uh quite fun to play. And
yeah.
one by one, we just added these mechanics in, always tuned to the device and to the play style and
Mm,
to the shorter game session. Still wanting to take the player through those,
yeah.
the different phases that a
Yeah.
MOBA is all about.
The storytelling
Um,
of a MOBA experience. Yeah.
of yeah, of the
Yeah.
different arcs.
Yeah.
And yeah,
That's
that's
very,
how
very cool.
we
Yeah.
ended up making Vainglory, I think, in like once we got funded, we we were able to hire a few people, and I think over the course of about 12 months we hired up to, I think, total of 9 people,
Mm,
and all of Vainglory was basically made in that first year. um
wow.
that's when we went public with the first
The
version of the
announcements and
game.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, now that you're talking about this and kind of how you tested and you tested on device and things like that, I am interested in getting your gut reaction to what sets your technical work aside. There's all this, when I think about engines, like I said, I'm very aware of my ignorance, but what would you say are truly the strengths of the technical work that you've brought with the Evil engine, as we call it? Like, if you had to sort of say what sets it apart, like, I would love to hear that from your words. Like, even if I don't understand all of it, like, what is it? I'm imagining there's some elements of this like built for touch piece, clearly, since of how you guys iterated, but like, what does that really mean? And how do you succinctly describe the advantages of the technical work you've done? Or where do you feel like it's innovated or allowed for advantages that you might not get from somewhere else? Like, what sets it aside? What sets it apart, I should say?
Yeah, it's actually really hard to answer, because it's hard to catch that in a couple of sound bites, right?
Sure.
It's the collective of thousands upon thousands of small decisions,
Mm,
um, that were tuned for the problem that we were trying to solve. And when I say problem we're trying to solve, that maps to a lot of different things, right?
sure.
Whether that is running on a very limited memory embedded device, right? Like, or originally, Vainglory, when it first came out, ran 60 frames a second on an iPad 2. Like, it
Mm,
was highly optimized to
mm,
do that. Um, but also, one of the things that I designed into the engine from day one is making sure that it is a synchronous multiplayer game. So the game engine can run in a client server mode,
mm,
from in its core principles, right? Whereas
mhm,
like this is actually something that for a lot of engines is sort of like tagged on.
mm,
I think now more and more engines are doing it. Like you can There's ways to do it with Unreal, and there's ways to do it with Unity, but neither one of those engines was ever designed from scratch to do that. We did that because like we knew that the first, when I was developing the engine in sort of like the mid 2000s, early, for the really early work, it became clear that online gaming was going to be
Right.
where it's at, right? So like if you don't design for that from day one, you're kind of missing the boat.
Yeah, you're just tacking things
So
on, or there's some,
yeah,
and then to have to go back is sort of like, well, we're not doing that, right? Like there's,
yeah.
yeah,
And then in terms of other strengths is like I was able to bring a lot of the pro console engineering experience to mobile, and that too wasn't really done at the time,
mm,
right? Either people weren't making their own engines or they were using off the shelf engines, and I think a lot of these engines have been optimized. Also, like devices have gotten stronger,
sure,
so now it is more viable to run high performance or like games with high requirements on your mobile device.
hmm,
But around the iPhone 4 and iPad 2, it was really hard to write a half decent performing game on Unreal. Unreal probably wasn't even ported yet, but even on Unity, it just wouldn't perform particularly well
mm,
because those
got it.
devices were so limited. And because this was the one and only platform we were going to optimize for and deploy on,
Mm,
we were able to we were able to make so many decisions that were very specific for this platform. And it ranges not just from how we implemented technology, but also tons of decisions of how we technically solve um, uh, all the different problems in the game, from
mm,
how we simulated the 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 gameplay and how we synchronize that over the network, but also how we lit the environments,
mm,
how we ran our animations, whether or not we would use dynamic shadows, like all these. I use a ton of tricks out of the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 era, for example,
yeah,
where like pre-shaders, there were so many things that you couldn't do, but we had this, um, and I was lucky enough to learn to have my intro into the games industry in that generation. So like I knew
mm,
all the tricks, right? It's like all the tricks of how you make lights and dynamic lights and lens flares and smoke, and how you fake it in a way that doesn't require tons of processing power, but you could
so
run on
cool.
a PlayStation 1. And I could basically take these tricks and basically re-implement them in our
Hmm,
engine running on an iPhone 4. And like, not a, I mean, it was just,
that's
yeah,
so
we were
cool.
just one of the few studios that did that at the time.
That's really, really cool, man. There's so much I would love to learn about your time on Vainglory. I know, I mean, I am conscious of time, and I know your time is very precious, not just to the company, but to your frame of mind and everything. I don't want to exhaust your time here, but yeah, is there anything else that stand out? I mean, I'm very curious about this Apple Stage thing. Are there any tidbits from there you want to share? Like, what was that even like? Like making your announcement there, and what
Yeah,
else
that
over
was
the course
crazy.
of
So like,
Vainglory?
yeah, Vainglory came out in soft launch first in Singapore and then
Right.
Philippines, and then we sort of grew it one by one. And and the announce on the Apple stage was basically its American launch. So we considered
Mm,
that our worldwide launch, but like at
sure.
that point, we had been rolling out Vainglory country by country for many months. Um, and the Apple announce was a crazy experience. I actually, honestly, I don't know how much I can say about it
Oh,
because
really?
I
Interesting.
had to sign my life away on NDA. But
Fair enough. Well, I don't want you getting in
at
trouble.
the at the very highest level, it is like Apple works with a lot of different companies
Mm,
in sort of scouting uh, who they're going to put on stage,
mm,
and it's a very sort of like high pressure cooker, very Apple-like process where they work sort of internally with a ton of people, and every couple of days they just not everyone makes it, and
it's like
they
a
get sent home.
America's Got Talent kind of thing, or
It
what?
sort of, yeah, and they just whittle it down, and
Yeah.
they help you hone and perfect it,
Mm, gotcha.
and yeah, so like we were sort of the sole survivor of the
Yeah.
Nostromo,
That's
and
awesome.
and then like the next morning we were on stage.
That's so cool, man.
And it was like we were under. There was so much like time pressure and like even psychological. That was actually a phase where I felt a lot of pressure because the stakes were so high, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
to be on stage with Apple, with I mean, for me also as N47 as founders,
Yeah. You
have your
represent.
name on there. Um, and Apple wanted us on stage because like they were launching at the time the iPhone 6,
Yeah.
and they were launching a graphics API called Metal for that,
Metal, right?
which
Yeah. I remember.
which allows you to really tightly integrate your game engine with what the hardware you run on, especially on the graphics side. And like that was another place where we were just like at the right place at the right time with the right
Mm.
tech, because we had such a competitive advantage to many of the other studios that were using off the shelf engines, and they had no ability to control the technology. And
Mm.
although the challenge was complicated and we still had to do it, we could port our engine to Metal really well. Like we had ported to various platforms before, and we knew our engine inside out.
Mm.
And we could do it fast and we could do it well. And I think Apple picked up on that. They knew that we knew what we were talking about. And I think we made a demo that showed really well.
Absolutely, man. Well, this time on Vainglory, I know is like there's a lot there, lots of ups and lots of hard times, challenging times. Um, is there anything else about that season you want to share? I know as we move into sort of like this second phase, second product story with Catalyst Black, which I am interested in getting your kind of your thoughts on that, because I know a lot of the tech has sort of evolved and grown since then as well. But um, anything else about that time or sort of the transition into this second phase that you want to reflect on or share? Um, I know it
Yeah,
was
I
a
mean, Vainglory holds a super special place in my heart, right? Like it was literally, I'm sitting in my living room now. Like we started coding Vainglory in this living
Mhm.
room,
Yeah,
and like from the very first line of code. And it was a game made out of passion, with all the rookie mistakes that you can possibly imagine, on the technology side, on the creative side, on the hiring side, on the business side. But it was a labor of love. and
yeah,
um
yeah, yeah.
and like maybe it sounds weird, but like I do think it has a place in history in terms of changing the narrative on mobile gaming,
Dude,
and that I'm super proud of. And
I just want to
like
say, as someone who is late to Super Evil, absolutely, 100%, dude.
thank
Like
you.
I will affirm that, and I think the thing that has blown my mind the most in the short time that I've been with the company is not just that that's still, I think, a driving mission of like, I don't think the story's over. It's not done. Like, I think that's one of the things I love the most about kind of the mission of what's going on. But um, it's also something that like the amount of love and passion and enthusiasm around Vainglory and what it's meant to people and their ability to play the game on a variety of devices or in a variety of
Yeah,
ways. Like, absolutely, you guys have done that, and I just want to affirm that. Like, I still feel like I'm pretty new to the Super Evil walk and Super Evil life, but as someone who is in that way, I just want to affirm, like, that's what I know you guys as, and I think you should absolutely, um, yeah, I think value that.
thank
That,
you, I really
yeah,
appreciate it.
for
Yeah,
sure,
like,
man.
and like I will always be proud of that. It's of course like there's mixed feelings that Vainglory
Yeah,
didn't end up being the business success that I wished it would have been. It was, but it was critically acclaimed. It,
yeah,
as I said, like I do think it changed the narrative. Before Vainglory came out, everyone was like, you can't do core games on mobile. And after it came out, people started going like, wait a minute, maybe there's a there.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and I think now, like now every studio is trying to make their version of synchronous multiplayer games, or
yeah,
real games, as the
for sure.
devices obviously also catch on.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and yeah, so like to talk a little bit about Spellfire, I'm super
Yeah,
excited about Spellfire. Um, it is really, for us as a studio, so like a phase 2 where we are trying to take so many of the learnings uh, of Vainglory and funnel them into a new project.
Mhm.
One where we can combine, um, the same level of passion and fun and exciting gameplay, but maybe course correct some of the things that we, in retrospect, know hurt Vainglory.
Mm.
Vainglory, for the people that got into it, was amazing, and they kept
Yeah.
playing it for many, many years. But the number of people that were never able to get into it because it was just so damn hard is
Yeah.
staggering, right? And that's hard to explain sometimes to someone who has been playing this game and really loved this game with a passion and for many years. But they were probably there because someone took them on that journey, right? Like
Yeah.
they had a friend, or or they were already mobile players. But it was really hard for people to get into,
Yeah.
and that makes it really tricky as a business proposition. And also, like, we never truly understood the business model behind it as well as as we should have,
Sure. Sure.
as
Well,
founders and as
you guys are so passionate about making a cool thing, and you come from
and
that core.
the irony is, like, when you start a company and you have no success to speak of, and you have no reputation to speak of, that is the only thing you think about.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
I'm just gonna make the
The
best
coolest
fucking game I could ever try to contemplate, because maybe I can convince one person to
right.
play it.
Yeah.
And how can I convince a second person to play it?
Yeah.
And
I love
like
it.
and like like, that is where it comes from,
Yeah.
right? And then,
Yeah.
like, only much later you realize, like, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't have done this, or maybe we shouldn't have done that. And, like,
Yeah.
now everyone is expecting this, but it really doesn't work as a business for us. And ultimately, all you know Super Evil is a deep passion. Is like a phase of my life, right? Like,
Yeah.
as we said, I started it. What were we saying? 2008,
Yeah.
nine,
Yeah.
right? So it's been like over 11 years, almost 12
Yeah.
years for me.
Yeah. It's a big deal,
Um,
man.
so, but yeah, it is still a business. We still have investors that need to be happy.
Yeah.
So, you know, we need to
Well,
make sure that it works well.
yeah. I want to ask you questions about Spellfire. I know I'm going to wrap this up here. I promise. I promise I'll let you go. But like, what excites you the most about this new game? And I also want to hear what sort of scares you the most about Catalyst Black. I'll just leave it at that. I tend to ask wordy questions.
Oh, wait. Oh, there's so many things that I'm excited about and so many things I'm scared about. What do you want to hear first? Like, hear first what I'm scared about, or hear first what I'm excited about?
Let's get the bad news out of the way. What are you
Okay,
scared of?
things I'm excited about, or no, things I'm scared about
Yeah,
is
yeah,
making when you make your first game, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain,
yeah.
right? Making your second game, I think, is much harder
Mhm.
because there's tons of expectations on
Yeah,
every single level, right? From people, from players just essentially wanting the exact same thing that they had before, to uh to it needing to be as big a success
right.
as Vainglory was. And that, on some level, like, that is daunting sometimes, right?
Sure.
um so that is, like, living up to that place that Vainglory had in history. I think is always going to be tricky, because it also came out at such a pivotal moment where,
Mm.
like, that game was so unique at that time.
Yeah.
um so that is something I'm somewhat scared about. And then, then there is your technical things I'm scared about, right? We're doing these, uh instant drop in, drop out,
Yeah.
very low, very
Low
short low
friction.
times. Many more players in the same match, which creates more network traffic, which, uh, higher rendering times, to get so many people playing at the same time. The action is much more fast paced, right?
Hmm.
So whereas with Vainglory, from a technical level, a MOBA is, it's high precision, but on some level, it's actually fairly
Yeah.
lockstep. It's fairly
Yeah. It's pretty
slow.
measured. Yeah.
Yeah. Now with Spellfire, where sort of more on the, how would you describe it? It's not quite a
Yeah.
shooter, but
I
it is
tw-
definitely much more action packed. There's
it's
a lot of
much more of an
strategy
action
to it,
game. Yeah, it's a twin
but
stick shooter action game. I would call it that. I mean, you can dodge bullets. So yeah.
exactly. And that requires, like, I mean, there's no dodging really in
Yeah.
Vainglory, right? Like that requires a level of precision and fidelity in the timing that is very different from what we've done before.
Yeah.
So, that those are things that
Yeah. Okay, well, what are you most excited about?
oh, so many things. I'm
Yeah.
actually really, like I know that it's a different art style,
Yeah.
but I'm actually really quite excited about the art style. And like I know we've shown some footage, but we've shown really really early footage.
Yeah. Super
Um,
early.
our like the style we're going for is still, it's not quite as sort of photo real as and gritty as what we're doing or what we did with Vainglory, but we're still looking for a rendering fidelity and a graphics fidelity. It's actually very, very refined,
Yeah.
right? A lot of atmospheric effects, a lot of particles, a lot of, animation and movement. But it is a more Pixar-like type of polish than necessarily like, a Gears of War kind of,
Yeah.
gritty. But I'm actually really excited for that sort of more like a fresher art style. I'm
Yeah.
really excited for having a game that is more accessible to a wider number of people.
Mm,
I have had some friends that played Vainglory before, but also had many friends that tried it and they just said like, I can tell it's a good game, but it's not for me.
right.
Simply because it was complicated, and these were all like gamers, right?
Yeah.
And I think with Spellfire, you know I think we'll be able to create something that is accessible for a much wider
Yeah.
range of gamers. And
Sure.
ultimately, the bigger the community is, the more fun it will be. So like that, I'm super
Yeah.
super excited for.
Well, man, I'm excited to be on this journey with you. I feel honored to be a part of this season for Super Evil Megacorp. I know I stand to learn a lot from you, and I
I
super appreciate your story and your contributions to the industry as someone who is a big fan of gaming and the games industry. I really appreciate your contributions. I do appreciate your courage to sort of be on the front line of innovation, particularly in terms of the devices we connect with on a daily basis, and sort of shattering the doubt around like, can the games we love be on a device like this? It's like, no, they can, absolutely. And I think I love the company's courage around that. Not just courage, like the sense of standard. I actually think that that's something that is very unique, and something I want to continue to invest in and foster myself.
Oh,
So
thank you. I
thank
really
you so
appreciate it.
much. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
think
was fun.
that's a story I'm excited to be a part of. So thank you for starting it, and we'll see how this goes this new season. So all right, folks, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining. Please do join the Discord for more information about the game. That's discord.gg/catalystblack. And of course, we'll be back with more game info there and all of our social channels. And until then, never settle for the lesser evil.
Take care.